What are your expectations regarding Nvidia's possible release of a 4000 Super Series next year? I think it's pretty likely that we're going to see a Super Series early next year, sort of a mid-cycle refresh, which would suggest that the next generation is probably coming a year after that.
Yeah.
So probably early 2025, if I had to guess. What are the expectations? I expect them to be, so if you've got like a 4080 Super, probably a bit more VRAM, just a bit more out of that silicon, so not as cut down, so maybe 20 gigabytes of VRAM at a guess, and, more cores and whatever, and they'd probably look to slot that in at that $1,200 US price point and then push the 4080 more officially down to where it is now. So what we've seen from the sort of Super generations in the past, I think the last time we had Super was Turing. So
Yeah, I think it'll be an opportunity for Nvidia to adjust their GPU offerings to more where people would have expected the original launch to be, but obviously a year after, so they've been able to get all the sales of the less exciting products for the early adopter type people. But I very much think it'll be not reducing prices or anything like that. Very much as you said, where they look at the current price points, release new GPUs at those price points that are a little bit faster and a little bit more capable, which if that was the original launch would have become much more appropriate. Like instead of complaining about a 10% performance improvement, if it's more like a 20 or 30% performance improvement, then you would have been much more happy. But because it will be maybe more of a super release, then it'll be different. But I would expect, an opportunity to adjust things like the $800 4070 Ti having more than 12 gigabytes of VRAM. They'll certainly have the opportunity to correct that with Super.
If there is a 4060 Super, and I'm pretty confident there'll be a 4070 Super, then those products could end up being quite decent. And like as you say, what we should have got the year prior,
you discontinue the 4060 Ti 8GB model to only offer like a 4060 Super or something that provides the level of VRAM that you would expect, and all along those sorts of things. I think, they've got the opportunity to do that, but like we saw with the 20 series Super products, they weren't that much faster. It wasn't like you were getting a revolutionary improvement.
Yeah, I think the further you went down the product stack, they were a bit more substantial. But like the 2080 Super, that was laughably bad from memory.
Well, the higher up the stack, the closer to the full silicon you were getting already.
That's right. There wasn't much wiggle room.
Yeah.
Whereas from the 4080 to the 4090, there's quite a large gap there to close up. So it could be more interesting, but ultimately I don't think it'll be terribly exciting. It'll just sort of a mid-cycle refresh that isn't quite what we saw with 14th gen refresh, but a bit more interesting than that.
Oh, it's going to be like you and your reviewers are going to be comparing the Super Series to the non-Super Series, which is going to make them look a lot worse than if they had just launched the Super Series to begin with, and you were comparing like a 4080 Super to the 3080. That would have probably been a much better and more favorable solution.
Definitely.
But because they've sort of gone, we'll give you 10% one year, then 10% the next year, it's kind of, not going to do too much. So, but
we'll see anyway.
We'll see what happens.